Okay, welcome to everybody. Just getting ready here. It's a bit early. We're having an early start today, friends and colleagues. I'm Alistair, head of the Department of Government and International Studies, Hong Kong Baptist University. We're having but I'm also the PI, as we say in the jargon, the principal investigator of our project, Trust and the Smart City. And our project, Trust and Smart City, it's funded by what we call as our faculty niche research area at Hong Kong Baptist. It's part of the Faculty of Social Sciences funding. It's quite a big project, actually. Well, it's a 2-year funding project. We're doing a survey that's in the field at the moment, actually, or shortly. We're doing interviews. We've got various work packages going on in the project. Project members are not all here today because they've got teaching responsibilities and so on. But anyway, so the project, broadly speaking, is Trust in the Smart City. I won't go into a huge amount of detail about this, except to say that today's session is the third of our workshops. We've got 4 workshops and 4 impact cafes. Now, someone can ask me, well, what's the difference between a workshop and an impact cafe? And I'll do my best to answer that when we've worked out exactly what the impact cafe is. Because of course in the workshops, but essentially the workshops, we're sort of presenting our work in progress and we're trying to get feedback. The impact cafes, we're very much in the second part of the project, reconnecting a bit with various stakeholders, and we're trying to sort of see how we've progressed together in a way, really. There will be 4 distinct work, and we're also having a conference actually in about a year's time. In May 2022, I think, or maybe June. Anyway, before the end of the project, we'll certainly be having the conference. Today's session is the product really of one of our, we're doing a rolling series of interviews. We've done, how many we've done doesn't really matter, but we've done about 20 or so, I think. But essentially, we're, it's innate to this project is that alongside classical statistical measures or whatever, we really feel that what actors say matters, and what actors think matters. And so, in a sense, in our face-to-face interviews, it's very much a question of listening to different aspects of the city, okay? The title is Trust in the Smart City, but for us, as will become very clear in Calvin's presentation later, smart does not just necessarily mean technology. Smart can also mean sustainable ways of thinking about the future of the city. And as Calvin, our excellent research assistant, will say later on, there's 2 basic framings of smartness in a way. And Calvin will draw the distinction between Germany and China in particular. I'm not anticipating too much your presentation. Let me not say too much more. I've spoken for 5 minutes already, but it's a great pleasure actually to have Paul Zimmerman with us today. It's absolutely wonderful. We've got 3 papers. The title is Designing, Debating and Developing. Where is Hong Kong? Designing, Debating and Developing the Smart City. Designing, we're going to hand over now to Paul Zimmerman, who's the Chief Executive of Designing Hong Kong, as well as a District Councillor. We're going to debating, as myself and Emilie will give you a sort of overview, really, of our interviews under the theme of urban narratives. And then developing, this is where Calvin will take a very different stance from that, and will let us have the first glimpse of the emerging Smart City Index and how Hong Kong sits in this Smart City Index that we're also developing. So enough from me, but I'm going to hand over now to my very good colleague and friend, Emilie.
So, hello, good morning, everyone. I am Emilie Tran from the Department of Government and International Studies and the Director of the European Studies Program. So I'm just going to say a few words for housekeeping. We have 3 presentations, as Professor Cole said, and we are going to start with our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Zimmerman, who I'm going to present in a short while. Not that Paul, a prominent figure of the Hong Kong polity and NGO landscape, needs any introduction. So we will have Paul's talk. During Paul's talk, the audience is very much welcome to type in their questions using the chat function in the Zoom room, and we can also raise your hands, and we will allow you time after Paul's talk that will last between 30 to 45 minutes, some time for ample time for Q&A. Then we will proceed with our second presentation as indicated on the poster here. And last but not the least exciting, we will have our senior researcher, Mr. Calvin Knight, to present about the Hong Kong Smart City Index. So a few words about Paul before we can start. Paul is actually an elected councillor in the Southern District, representing the Pokfulam constituency. He is born in the Netherlands, and he arrived in Hong Kong in 1984. Paul holds 2 masters from Erasmus University, masters in social sciences and economics, and a master of arts in transport policy and planning from the University of Hong Kong. Prior to engaging into public work, actually Paul built and sold a successful design company, and he was executive of an umbrella company called Tsun International, in charge of travel and automotive businesses. Paul is now a full-time dedicated person to public service in Hong Kong, and he is with us this morning, and I'm very grateful to you, Paul, for that, in your capacity of CEO of Design in Hong Kong, a non-profit organization devoted to improving urban planning, design, and better living in Hong Kong. So, Paul, you champion these causes by advocating good planning and sustainable development through many NGOs and alliances, and you will expand on these parts in your presentation. Paul was also awarded an honorary membership of the American Institute of Architects in Hong Kong for his role in improving the harbourfront of Victoria Harbour, and I think all of us living in Hong Kong, we can see the difference. So Paul is also the chairman of the Coalition on Sustainable Tourism, and lately Paul has been also very visible in his fight for the single-use beverage packaging working group, best known for its initiative Drink Without Waste. And I'm happy that you've given you a paper cup this morning to be in line with what you are fighting for. So we're thankful for Paul for being with us this morning. And without further ado, let's give a big hand to Paul and welcome him to the floor. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. And in preparing for this, we had a conversation at my office when you came by. I don't know, 2 months ago, I think it was, and we had a discussion about smart city, to which I said, well, smart city, how do you define it? And I was glad to hear at that time already that smart city was not defined as a city of the internet, but as a city of good thinking and good communication, rather than just a matter of technology. Designing Hong Kong was set up in about 2002, and the very first activities that we got involved in, I have to see that how I work my screen. Yeah. Okay, I'll have to scroll through it. Our first project was around the harbour, and at that time the discussion was in court because there was a fight between governments about reclamation. Government wanted to proceed reclamation, and there were some groups in society that wanted to stop reclamation. That ended up a battle in court, and from that, looking at that battle at the time, we realized that there was going to be an end to the reclamation, but it may be a little bit more, a little bit less, but there was going to be an end to the reclamation. But that the key battle was not the reclamation itself, but the key battle was how do we develop the waterfront? Because if the city has always grown through reclamation and development continues, but if you stop reclamation and development continues, then there is no land left along the waterfront. And it was that thought that led to this project, Designing Hong Kong Harbour District. And the way we conducted this project was trying to build an alliance among different groups in society to start thinking about how to go forward on the waterfront. So we first of all basically separate stages. We built a list of people that we thought were immediate stakeholders, from property developers and architects and planners and government officials, to the more general public and represented by environmental groups and politicians. And we started basically by visiting them and having conversations, and then setting up workshops and having conversations, and then ultimately coming up with a plan that we present to government, trying to make a change. Because it had all been done behind closed doors, really, these conversations, the direct one-on-ones, government was quite easy to say that they were not very interested, and they were not participating very actively, probably because there was the court case on. And so what we then decided to do was to make a public event, and we organized a large forum where we brought all of the intelligence and the know-how and all the good speakers together with some examples from overseas. And that moved the needle very quickly because everybody in the room was well educated on the topic. They had been involved in these discussions. And then, of course, everybody else joined, the media joined, and it became a big topic that was well discussed in a matter of a full day, and government responded by setting up the Harbourfront Commission. So that is, okay. So that is a way of a project that went quite well. Now the government has set up a Harbourfront Commission, and the harbourfront along both Kowloon and Hong Kong Island waterfront are going to be completed at some stage. About 50 kilometers will be connected out of the 74 with promenades and parks. From that project, slowly developed this idea of building a trail around Hong Kong Island. The north side along the harbour was part of the Harbourfront Commission work. And when I joined the district council, the southern district, the section from Kennedy Town to Stanley was one that I put up as a proposal for linkage. Again, there's some large investments required along the way. So to get that support for that money, there is in fact only two really expensive ones, the one at Telegraph Bay and the one at Waterfall Bay. To get support for that, we need to get broader commitment from the community and demand for this linkage. So we promoted it, first of all, by just putting up signs, and that came out of District Minor Works. And so that people would get to know the route. And in 2018, 19, we then extended that with a plan for a route from Stanley to Chai Wan, and we're waiting for funding for putting a route. But now having it complete, and we had COVID, we had a chance to go and walk it ourselves for a holiday over Easter. In a matter of 3 days, walked the entire route, photographed it, documented it, and published it with a website. And we got now several groups promoting it. And several people have now organized events around it. People have done runs, people have done a charity run. People have over Christmas organized public events around it. So now that the whole idea of Hong Kong Island Coastal Trail has become a concept that people understand, and the district councils, we went to all of them to get their support, and they all did motions of support. So now there is a bit of momentum, but it's really a matter now of time for government to pick it up, whether they would do it this term of the district council or they do it next term of the district council. I don't know, but I'm confident that as it is now a well-known concept, it will happen in the future. Add these very quick some pictures of what that entails, and parks and promenades and informal arrangement of thousands of statues at Wah Fu and the Waterfall Bay, kind of a well-known tourist site in Repulse Bay, absolute nature with the mangroves at Tai Tam Bay, the peaks of Dragon's Back, and then back down to the waterfront at Taiwan, and then through the busy areas where we're still waiting for the waterfront to be fixed up. So it's a great experience, and it's a diverse experience. The other battle that has been an important battle is the battle for the country parks, and again, there it's all about collaboration. The fortunate or unfortunate start was an article written by C.Y. Lim when he was not yet the chief executive, with his plan that we should develop parts of the country park. And of course, this was upsetting to the green groups, but it was not a lot of traction. It was a small article, and there was not at that time a lot of feedback on it. But we were alert and we were worried as green groups who were already communicating with each other about the future of country parks and despoliation of natural areas that was going on in Hong Kong. So fortunately or unfortunately, in several months later, there was a serious destruction of land at Dalong Wan, and we became aware of that as green groups, as part of our normal kind of like being aware of destruction going on, and we contacted the media, and we staked it out for about a month. And we sent letters to government, and we got very silly responses back. Basically, they were not very interested in what was going on, and very unresponsive. So we built up all of that ammunition, and by a month later, the story was published in the South Sunday Morning Post, and with great pictures. And within that weekend, the Facebook was set up, and within 3 days, it went up to 80,000 followers, and it became a movement. And by Sunday night, there was a meeting of anybody who was interested, and about 35, 40 people showed up at a room at a university in Hong Kong, where a group was formed, the Save Our Country Parks Alliance, to kind of combat the destruction of country parks. And that involved hikers and sports people and green groups and people that were interested in geomorphology. And there was a diverse group of people that were interested, and became an alliance, very diverse. And that became a movement, and that forced government's hand on the issue of enclaves. And ultimately, I believe this is what forced the hand 10 years later for Carrie Lam to say there will be no development in country parks. Country parks are an important part of society in Hong Kong, and now with COVID, it has reconfirmed its importance for everybody's health. So country parks are safe for now, but of course the threat will never go away, and who knows who's the next chief executive, the threats may come back. And just to show you some pictures here, compilation of all these different people that get involved, all these families that got involved along the way as we organized events and built that community effort. Another thing that we're working on right now is Drink Without Waste. And again, it's a matter of building alliances. We, since 2017, have been roping in the beverage industry, the retailers, people that are in waste and recycling, real estate managers, NGOs, and other organizations, large organizations. So we got a good coalition, and the issue is really how do we get rid of that's actually the wrong terminology. How do we stop 5.5 million packages, drink packaging, going to waste every day and going to the landfills, because that is what it is, 5 million a day. So we've been working on since 2017 on first agreeing the strategy, which is easy. Strategies like monopoly money. Nobody has to pay anything, but it's a good idea. So we agreed on the strategies to reduce the packaging that goes there, having more dispensers on the redesign to make sure that packaging can be recycled and uses recycled content, to recover, finding ways of getting it back from the market, infrastructure, and value on return, giving people some money for returning it, and ultimately the recycling. the recycling capacity and the construction of factories that can properly recycle, not just a backyard somewhere illegally in the new territories. So now we are 2021, and government is now totally confident that it has support. So it has started the producer responsibility scheme public consultation. They are not talking about plastic bags because they don't want a burden on society. They don't want to talk about the waste charging. Again, they don't want burden on society in desperate times as we have today. But they were very happy to bring forward a producer responsibility scheme because it felt it has the support from such a wide group. So that was the benefit of bringing people together before government comes out. And so we're kind of confident that government will come along with the legislation that is necessary. And in the meantime, we have started a number of voluntary schemes to get people to return their beverage packaging. So again, that's probably an example again of building alliances and to get things done in the city. Next, on public space, again, there's a lot of discussion that we've been able to generate, and again, probably fortunate but also unfortunate. The wharf company at Times Square occupied public space that they should space in their private development that is designated for public use, and they were occupying it for private users and commercial users. And the debate around public space then took off with when that became public, and there was no stopping since. I think the community as a whole has been fighting very hard, and government was forced to respond to that. So that picked up from discussions initially at the Fringe Club about public space, and it was that incident that of the Times Square that really blew that in the open, and it made that a movement. An important part of public space is our waterfront, as I said, and people may recognize this or they may not recognize it, but this is was voted Hong Kong's most popular public space several years ago in a public space awards program where we asked people to come up with ideas and proposals, and then the public voted, and it was voted. This is the Kennedy Town, the public pier. Unfortunately, it's closed now because this pier is, as you can see, there's no railings around it, and the people were using it. There was also cargo handling at the same time, and the Marine Department put a sign that says it's illegal to be here, but people were there anyway. But they were there, and then by definition, they're at their own risk because they were there illegally and without authority, which meant allowed the space to become really very informal, where people are coming there with their dogs off the leash, people are cycling, people are fishing, people just hanging around reading a book. So it became a very informal and unusual public space in Hong Kong where you basically could do anything, and everybody was looking after each other. There have been no incidents other than 2 dogs that fell into the water, despite the fact that there was no railing. And it was open, and it was a very popular public space. Now, under the pressure of COVID, the Marine Department has now decided or found an excuse to close it on entry requirements and checking people that they were not infected in and out, which is probably a good thing. But as a result, the area is closed. So with this enthusiasm for the area, we now are looking at what is going to happen to the Kennedy Town waterfront, and everything that's blue on this slide is basically whether it's a building or where you can no longer get and have no entry. So you can see the whole pier being blue. But by making everything blue here, we now have also identified the area where it's not blue, and that's then the public space, the park, the Belcher Bay Park, the sidewalks, and so on. And a local resident there, Emiliano da Pirro, he's been studying this, and he has some great proposals for what to do for that space that is left. And his proposals are now put to government because he's analyzed. Basically, we got some narrow pathways in these areas, and a lot of planters, but these planters have, in fact, not much use other than make the highway look a little bit better. But these planters can be removed and replaced with and make great public space. So the debate is on. The ideas are put out in the public domain. The district councillors are alerted, and they will discuss it. And so we hope that the community will pick up on this discussion. Although everybody's a little bit confused now because people are very focused on the closure of the pier rather than on developing the alternative. But so we need to get people to step over the fact that the pier is closed, which is unfortunate, but it was somehow expected. And now we have to move on to finding solutions for the space around it. The government should have been nicer about fixing the space first before they close the pier, but alas, so be it. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I'll continue. Missing seats. We've highlighted missing seats in a project earlier as if people want to enjoy the city, they've got to be able to sit. If you want people to walk, you've got to make sure they can sit. Because otherwise people are not going to walk. You're going to take a car or a bus or so that they can sit when they travel. If you can walk and you know you can sit, you will walk further. So missing seats is a walking initiative. And we photographed these locations where people have put their own chairs. Now it's very colloquial and people love it that we all do this. It's kind of Hong Kong's informality, and we're not looking at replacing Hong Kong's informality. But on the other hand, it also indicates here a failure in governance that when you build a bus stop, you build a bus stop without a seat. So, I mean, it is an absolute, not a very smart city. Anyway, so this is where then we publicize these photographs and also send them up to government, and then the result, $80 million was allocated in the policy address for putting seats at bus stops. And right now you see these bus stops, these little seats appearing. The bus company is not giving up on its advertising revenue, so we get little pedestals on the side. But at least we have progress, and so there is a response. But the response really is to public pressure, but it's not everywhere. This photograph of this weekend, the seats are the wrong way around. Yes, this is in Sha-Tin. And of course, not everybody is helping out. This property owner doesn't like people sitting on the ledge of his window, which would a perfect seat where everybody was sitting in one side, and he's put up this really nasty decoration. And I've tried to sit on it. You don't last very long. So we have this anti-seating attitude, and it's a matter of how we can get a better attitude about that. And along those lines, here's some photograph on a corner where I made friends with some locals who had put their own seats, and I would stop a motorbike, get off and have a chat to the locals. Actually, this man himself is not such a local. He visits his friends and he is from Sha-Tin. But that was in 2013. And then over the years, as I came by, I photographed the use of the seats. And then the seats stayed, but development started and the building went. And at some stage, the seats are empty and people are gone. The seats were still there. That was at least a good thing. But the development had lost them. And when the development was completed, the seats gone completely, and the people have gone too. I've written to the developer, so why don't you put some seats on the corner? It shouldn't be too easy to cut the plants. There's been no positive response to that. But I'm happy to show that people are regaining the use of their space slowly themselves. So we'll get there. People will do it themselves if you don't respond to it. So if you're not very smart in communicating with and understanding society, then fortunately society is like water. It will find its way around you at some stage again. Missing links is a project that we have stopped. The problem with missing link is that we started to identify missing links and publicizing them, and that was similar idea as the missing seats. We saw people crossing the road, walking through planters at places where there was no crossing, and then we publicized it. But instead of the government then creating a crossing, they put up more fences to stop people from crossing where they shouldn't cross. So we had to stop this project because we'll have to figure out a different way of doing it, because just publicity around it gives a negative response. So we had to be careful with that. But out of it, we have the wins that we did get was at Salisbury Road, where the crossing has been rebuilt. And it's very soon that Middle Road here, we think we can get it. But we have gone the other way around this. We went directly to government and tried to have a discussion with them directly, rather than make a lot of public noise about it, and making it impossible for the transport department to be a little bit more flexible. So there's different ways around it. A future project that we hope to launch is walking with wheels. In fact, there are a lot of people walking with wheels in the city. Many are of the ones that we know very well are people with disabilities, because we have this barrier-free, equal access attitude and well established in the city, although infrastructure may be missing. We have drop curbs, although the drop curbs may not always work very well for everybody, and it's a hard work to get somebody over the ledges. And not everywhere do we have proper access. This is at IFC, where you've still got to carry up your baby cart up the stairs. But in general, we are aware of the need of people with babies and elderly to give them barrier-free access. But there are others that need walking around with wheels, and those are the people with cargo. And we try to stop them from coming around, but they're very important for our city. There is, of course, people that go and tourists that need to go to the MTR, and they can't move around with their suitcases. Then they're going to take a taxi, and then they're going to block traffic instead of just walking a short route with their wheelies. But there are people that are doing deliveries of all sorts and in all shapes and forms, and they're an important part of keeping our city moving. And how do we design the city for people that walk with wheels is an important consideration that we got to think about, because right now they're sharing a lot of our road space, and that is not always very safe, as this picture shows out. And for him, and this gentleman with the garbage bags, he has no other way to get to the refuse collection point than fighting himself through the traffic, and there's no crossing for them. And we had at least one death in the last few years of a fellow that has a very small job moving your garbage, but we're not protecting him, and we still haven't fixed the crossing despite the transport department being aware of it. So so we have these issues with people walking with wheels, and we believe we need to get more attention to it. So we hope to launch some kind of public process later this year with an exhibition of photographs, and to invite more people to get involved in thinking about walking with wheels as a mode of transport in our city that needs to be catered for, like you cater for pedestrians, like you cater for cars and buses. You need to cater for people who walk with wheels because they're important to our city. I can go on many of the projects, but this is the work that we do at Designing Hong Kong, and we believe that these are examples for things, projects and styles of working to get our city to be smarter and more sustainable. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Paul. Terence, do we have any questions from the? Not at the moment, so we are happy to entertain questions.
Let me just say, I found that an exhilarating talk, really, really interesting, particularly for someone who's still quite new to Hong Kong. I mean, I've been here for about 18 months now, but I mean, what you're saying really, and the historical dimensions are extremely interesting, the photos, the healthy street and so on, how it evolves with time. What struck me really was a couple of things. Obviously, in a sense, what you're describing is clearly, it's the progressive urban coalition, it's the coalition that cares, in a sense, about city. I mean, it's a particular sort of advocacy coalition. I mean, advocating the city as being a space of public sharing, a space of a public space in general. I think that the various projects that you showed us were really fascinating, actually. And so I don't really have a question except to say that, and to say thanks, because I learned an awful lot about that. I suppose in a way, one of the difficulties of designing Hong Kong might be that to pursue your objectives, obviously you need to talk to government. And you need to have a good working relationship with government. You need to have a good working relationship with the transport department, marine department, whatever, as you illustrated. And I suppose talking to government, it varies somewhat depending on which part of government you're talking to, I suppose, doesn't it? And I think in a sense it must be, you probably need government, but then I guess government needs you as well, because in a sense what you're doing is you're sort of saying to government, actually, this is what the people, this is what Hong Kongers think about these, and particularly think of the parks. I mean, clearly the country parks is such an integral part of life here, as I've understood. So in a way, I think that was a really inspiring presentation. I don't have any particular questions except to.
Just to follow up, I mean, what I haven't shared is the pain. So, it's kind of like if we can highlight all these topics, but the pain that goes into this, to establishing these channels of communication with government or to get people behind it. You can spot an issue, like, for example, this old fellow walking with his wheels and the accident that took place and trying to get something fixed. But then to get something like that moving in Hong Kong, the barriers to good governance in terms of communication between different levels of government, with the district councillors, with the transport department, and then actually doing something about it and being progressive with it. That is where we're struggling a lot. Now, I've only been actively involved in these matters living in Hong Kong. So for me, it's very hard to compare what was going on in Holland, because I left Holland as soon as I finished my study. And so I've not done this in Holland. So I can't tell you how long it would take in Holland to kind of get something like this addressed. So when it comes to comparison of different cities and government, I don't know. But definitely there is a need in Hong Kong for a rethink of how we work. Our transport planning design manual, if I compare the age of that with where we are in the UK and the age of the current one in the UK, this manual for streets number 2, ours basically predates manual streets number 1, and it is basically, with a few words changes, the one that was running in the UK in the 70s and the 80s as the design manual, and we still have that. But the UK has moved on, and we've got some of the most beautiful street design, where the intelligence that's in there in terms of sharing space and mixing different modes of transport, bicycles in the park, pedestrians on the roadway. I mean, the kind of how we have been moving on to make sure that all of that happens and safely. So in Hong Kong, we're not getting there. And I think this is the issue. I think that as Hong Kong as a society, are we a smart city? Why is it such a hard slug to move forward on? When you look at this photograph, you go, oh yeah, of course. But how to move forward on those? And I think that's the biggest challenge that we face. And I think that Hong Kong, we have to figure out how we're going to do it in Hong Kong, despite of what happens with politics, or taking account of what happens with politics, which is not the way we may like to see it happen. But now that some of these things are a given, how do we make the city smart despite all of that? So, thanks.
Yes, Paul, thank you very much. I have actually 2 questions. First of all, how do you explain the slowness of the transport department for an issue that is as simple as this one? Secondly, you mentioned about politics, and in your presentation, it was very much you are designing Hong Kong and the government. So to what extent do you manage to rally behind you the people from your own political camp, but also from the other camp, because those issues are basically cross camps. So do you see a divide there, or do you see a kind of unity here?
Well, it's not easy to go and walk across the aisle. And it wasn't, because as soon as something was seen as a topic owned by one side, and the other side didn't want to touch it. So if you wanted to walk across the aisle, you have to make sure you didn't own it. So there are things where we have made movements by making sure we didn't own it. So we kind of got it into somebody else's back to make sure that at least it happened. Although then people will never know or remember that who was actually behind it. So, you know, so there's a strategy on getting something done. You have to walk around it. Yeah, your first question on transport department, you consider this a simple issue, but transport department will explain that this is absolutely not a simple issue, and that it is core to their problem. That is the contestation around space in the street in a city where we have a very short road network. We have the highest density of number of vehicles per kilometer road in the city, other than Monaco. So you have this kind of competition for space on the road that's intense, and within that transport department, you know, how are they going to operate and make sure that this gets changed? Could they set their priorities different? Should they adjust them quicker? Should we move faster with electronic road pricing, move these vehicles, EF 3278 and whatever the other one is, there out of the way, make sure that they're not there when it's busy? Absolutely. And we need leadership there that we just don't see at a district level. The transport department works on a general Hong Kong level. They have engineers at local level to make things keep moving, at least if, you know, to make sure that the traffic doesn't entirely stop, but to actually do initiatives that really strategically change an environment like this in Central, where you have to be very smart, and you have to have high level support. But in Hong Kong, high level support is busy with the transition of Hong Kong into the national system of politics, and they've been busy since 1982 with that. The last thing that they're busy with at that high level is with these kind of mundane things. So we have this disconnect because your small government at the top is so busy with a big picture that other cities don't have to deal with. New York doesn't have to deal with it. London doesn't have to deal with it. They just get on with running the city. But our top layer in government is not running the city. They're trying to figure out how to fit in with the mainland. And so they're very busy with that.
We've got a question. There's a question here. This is Evan from Hong Kong Design Center.
Evan.
Smart cities should be buildings. Good design should therefore be people-centric, not admin-centric. We need to sustain the design movement and niche creativity and accelerate more restructuring. Any advice?
No, I totally agree with Evan. And Evan runs the design center. I know him quite well. And so I think design, placemaking, those kind of processes are very important to try to get some movement at the ground level to capture good ideas, good input, local solutions. Very important, but you need to get mandates that are from the top. You cannot just generate ideas and then nothing happens. Then you just get more frustration. So you need a clear mandate from the top down that we are going to change things, and that when the good ideas come forward, we are going to experiment, and people stick their neck out. But currently, within the current system, nobody dares to stick the neck out for anything. So you need the top level saying, hey, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to do placemaking throughout the city, and we're going to experiment with good ideas. Okay, tomorrow we're going to put some red pins here. We're going to stop the cars from coming in, and we're going to do that for the next 6 months and see what goes on. You need pilots teams. You need people that have the balls to do that. And we just that's the missing part.
Thank you very much, Paul. And then we can proceed to the second presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, mute back over. That's the problem. Excellent. Thank you. You mentioned content board.
I could go on and have another 10.
Okay. Thanks very much. Can I see myself? I don't want to see myself. It's just I like to just see myself a little bit.
So you can see yourself looking up rather than.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's enough. Yeah, absolutely. It's just okay. Well, thanks for Paul for that wonderful talk. We're going to follow up now straight away because time is is pressing on. The title of this paper, Urban Narratives of the Smart City, the Case of Hong Kong. I mean, it started off actually, we're doing a special issue, Emilie and I, we're doing a special issue of the review China Perspectives, and we have a special issue on our project. And the title of our paper is, in that issue at least, is Causal Mechanisms and Urban Narratives of the Smart City. But we're not going to try the causal mechanisms part, because in a sense, we're carrying out a survey. And the survey is going in the ground in the next few days, actually. It'll be carried out by Pori, and they'll deliver, a sort of statistical, classical survey on our project. It's been 6 months getting that survey together. It's been hard work, frankly. But anyway, we'll get it back and we'll do some sort of statistical work. But this is more the urban narratives part. It's more really giving an insight into the emerging findings of our interviews. We've been interviewing not a huge number, but we've had about 18 or so interviews. And we've got more lined up. We've basically seen three different sorts of people. We've seen actors from, I suppose, foreign companies, quite a few actually, probably overrepresented in our sample. We've seen a certain number of NGOs in Hong Kong. We've managed to get a little bit into sort of Hong Kong government stroke civil service, although not enough, to be fair. And we need to do more work on that. So in a sense, it's a very experimental piece. This is sort of a progress of where we are in a way with our work. How do I change this thing? Ah, there we go. Okay, so yeah. So essentially, urban narratives. I just say a little bit about why this phrase urban narrative. There's a narrative term, if you like, in public policy, in much of Europe at least, and in the US. Terms such as storytelling, narrative, discourse, they use increasingly, often a bit interchangeably, and we need a bit more rigor in what we're actually saying. But if we take storytelling, Cambridge Dictionary defines this as the activity of writing, telling, or reading. If we take the idea of a narrative in political science, at least, for Patterson and Rennick, a narrative is essentially a story, but it's a term more associated with fiction than political science, perhaps. The political science bit comes in because narrative refers to the ways in which we construct disparate facts and weave them together cognitively to make sense of our reality. Now, I'm not saying that we managed to do that here, but in a sense, that's what inspires a little bit this paper. And it comes back to this, I won't talk about political science literature, but this whole anti-positivist movement in a way that's very much about interpretative policy analysis movement, based a lot on ideas of meaning. And so the idea that, in a sense, social actions are meaningful. Do they actually genuinely, authentically represent, in a sense, what social actors do? Now, in the city, it's interesting, there's a whole literature on this in terms of marketing and branding the city, clearly. How do you use an urban narrative to brand the city? Before coming to Hong Kong, I was involved in the project with Pittsburgh, Newcastle, and Lyon. And it's still going on, this project. It's part of a Jean Monnet project. And it's all about how cities use basically place marketing and how they develop, particularly American cities, entire units within the municipal administration to sell the city, basically. And what are the different strategies for selling the city? So partly branding and marketing issues. Urban geographers, of course, use stories, narratives to promote the city. So try and attract investment capital, to talk about the creative city or the creative class in the context of globalized and neoliberalized capitalism. And it's interesting how not so much globalization, but to some extent, global capitalism can clearly promote local stories or local narratives. So urban narratives, and in the literature, there's particularly in the geographical perspective, it's in a sense the idea of selling places with a focus on various parts of public policy: planning, culture, economic strategy, architecture, music, and so on. And in a sense, this is the background to what we're doing. I'm not the geographer, but in a sense, it's interesting, I think, to just take this notion of narrative. So what we do is there's 3 questions that are common to Hong Kong and other cities. In which context do urban narratives emerge? Can we identify something that's called urban narrative? If so, what's its salient features? Are there diverse narratives within cities? I mean, it's interesting, if we look across our American and UK and French cities that we were looking at in the previous project, they were all cities in decline, you know, Newcastle, Pittsburgh, Saint-Etienne, these are all declining cities, declining industrial cities. But they were all cities that were claiming to live a renaissance, you know. But in a sense, who was pushing that narrative of renaissance, and who were the losers of this process? Which particular districts were losing out anyway to this positive framing, if you like, of renaissance? So, and can we identify specific coalitions within the city, or specific, I say advocacy coalitions in my question before, but specific alliances, if you like, pushing for particular versions of the city, of the sustainable city, for example? Who are the actors involved that are pushing for this? And what are the, in a sense, what are the opponents? And if we take the classic urban regime theory from American cities, then it's clearly big business that allies with local government, and put, you know, in a long-standing sort of political economic coalition. Atlanta was the classic model of this, to which you might oppose, say, San Francisco, whereby you have many more sort of alternative visions of what the city should be, more cleaner visions, perhaps, more tolerant, socially diverse visions. So, in a sense, there's no one answer to this, but there are clearly different sort of framings. And then, thirdly, in a sense, what are the alternative narratives we might see within the city? And I'll come back to say a bit about this. But do these alternative narratives create tensions? And I'm talking about city level here, not so much the political situation, but, you know, actually within the city itself. What are the potential alternative narratives? These are just, again, this is a very, very short slide here, but some of the obvious urban narratives we hear about, they're positive stories. Cities offering a good place for their inhabitants to live. Cities involved in economic development. Cities being increasingly collective actors internationally, of course. This is an interesting point in some of the bigger cities. The city promotes, and we saw this obviously with the Paris Climate Agreement, and when Trump left, but the American citizens said, well, we're not leaving actually this agreement. We still remain committed to climate change, to climate control. Cities talk about size. I claim that small is beautiful, or that larger cities are dynamic engines of growth. And actually recently with the migrant or refugee crisis, if you like, cities as places of hospitality. It's very interesting actually how across Europe, and certainly across Europe, which is the case I know best, you know, how a number of cities have said, well, we will welcome migrants, if you like, or refugees, because these are people who are suffering, and we deserve, it's our humanistic tradition to welcome them. And of course, in a sense, the narrative of the smart, sustainable city is, that's part of it, fits in here. Okay, so what we do in this paper, I'll speed up a bit. Essentially, it's very, very first cut. But essentially, we try and take smart city from our interviews, and we try and see, I suppose there's 2 framings really of smart city that we try and uncover in our interviews. We're particularly interested in the particular Hong Kong Smart City Blueprint, because that's the formal document with the 6 elements of the, you know, of the smart city. But where do these ideas come from? You know, who invented them? Are they invented endogenously, or are they coming from somewhere else? You know, probably coming from somewhere else. Calvin will tell us later, in the sense that these are some more generic ideas associated with ideas of smart city across the world, really smart living, smart mobility, and so on. Can we, as far as we can say anything about the interviews we carried so far, which of course are completely anonymous, I'm not going to say who's in the particular interviews, but what are the sort of stories that are emerging at this particular juncture? So moving on, just one point about the Smart City Blueprint. What's come out very much in our interviews has been that this appears very much as an externally delivered narrative, in a sense, one that's designed by marketing and promotion agencies. So I think PricewaterhouseCoopers was particularly responsible for the first version of this. And in a sense, it draws on expertise from various departments of government but there's, the prominent view from our interviews at least is a relatively little overview or coordination between different bureaus within the government. Relatively little evidence of joined up decision making. And again, from the perspective of actor-based sociology, which French political scientists love, in a sense, we see that there's a sort of silo-based public administration that persists rather than an enabling or facilitating that. That was just a very quick word cloud done with NVivo of the 50 leading words coming out of the interviews. The problem is I can't quite work out how to link Hong and Kong for the moment. So there is 2 words. I know you can do it. It's just I need to get one of these bright research systems to do it for me. But that's giving a very pictorial view of the 50 words that come out the most in our interviews. Okay. But I'm now going to do something a little bit different. And again, that might say, well, that's just a picture. In a sense, that's just a visualization. Fair enough. But this is a bit more than a visualization. This is a cluster analysis of what the interviews say. And this is, we use the NVivo program here, which is a qualitative data analysis program. Mm-hmm. It's probably better just to read the interviews and mark them with a pen, and this is what we do as well, of course. But nonetheless, it's quite useful, NVivo, because it allows, it's a software, but it regroups the words basically that come up in the interviews. And it's got this quite nice feature, that's the cluster feature. It uses Pearson correlations to cluster words. So it's quite neat. And essentially, and you can say how many clusters you want. You might want 3, you might want 10. 5 is a good figure, I think. So you can alternate how many clusters you want. But on the very left side, the cluster, I named these clusters, but the words that are clustered seem to me to fit these different readings of what smart city is. There's one that's very clearly a digital reading. That's the first one. So it's smart, private, city, digital, innovation, blueprint, industry, development, challenges, public services. They're all clustered according to the software. I think what's interesting is what they call twins and triplets. And that's where the software actually links together particular words, if you like. So it links smart and city, which is logical, of course. It links digital and public and services, which is again logical. It links development and challenges. Now, to interpret this, I sort of interpret this as being smart. Okay. Now, but this is debatable. This is just my interpretation, not my spin on this. The second one, I interpret as being sustainable. But these are successful, research, world, cities, system, trust, area, companies, mobility, living, environment, place, China, product, company. And if you do the twins and the triplets, it's cities and trust that correlate quite closely, companies and environment, China and company. Again, this is very intuitive in a sense. It's not sort of, we're not saying these are the firm iron sort of correlations, but it's what the software throws out. A sense of place is the third subcluster identify. Hong Kong, sense, people, sector, policy, Singapore, government, mainland, data, open, things, time, thing, department, technology, information. But what things are thrown together? Well, Hong and Kong, obviously. If you knew how to use the software properly, that would be obvious. Policy in Singapore is quite interesting. Government and mainland, open and data, technology, information. I think in a sense, this is I'm calling this a sense of place. We might call it something else. Then there are 2 little clusters, if you like, that are very specific. They come from our interviews. One is about basically the ID card. So it's service, identity, and card. Identity and card are linked, and in a sense, that's because we did interviews on the ID card, because it's one of our mini case studies in the project. And then waste France, this makes sense because we interviewed the waste management companies, which are mainly French companies, big French companies that we don't need to say who they are, but we all know. And in a sense, so that came out quite strongly from that particular thing. So let me just hand over now to Emilie, but just to say that in a sense, I think we have to be very limited and modest, not claim too much about this, but it's intuitive, and I think it's quite a nice entry point to do further sort of investigation. I wouldn't say much more than that about it, but I think that this is it's a different way of looking at the interviews. I mean, obviously we could do we could present findings from our survey, which we will do, and that will give us totally different sort of grid, if you like, for reading it. This is what we do with these interviews. I'm going to hand over to Emilie, but in a sense, you, Emilie, you're going to take 3 interviews, aren't you? So I'll quickly hand over to you. So we're going to look at the themes. Well, I'll let you say what you're going to look at.
Thank you very much, Alistair. I will just use a few minutes to go much deeper into each interview, and we have selected 3 interviews this morning to share with you, representing 3 different groups of stakeholders. So first interviewee that we call 1 represents the international business community, and it is about the cluster about global, so everything global. So when we talk about Hong Kong and the smart city, global, international, foreign companies, they are very much present in the narrative and in the actors that we have met. So companies, especially global companies, are very much part and actors, driving forces of the smart city in Hong Kong. This is why we have to interview them. And they are also very much part driving the performance of Hong Kong in terms of a smart city. And they have also a lot of concerns about how these performances could be further improved. The international business community also has a lot of to say about the public policies, although they have benefited from these public policies a lot in the past years. So throughout these international public-private partnerships that are part of the smart city blueprint of Hong Kong. And these public-private partnerships, transnational public-private partnerships, exist in the utility sector, in the transport sector. We talked about waste management, everything about mobility, banking, etc. But of course, the international business community is also growing much more concerned about data security issues, and they are very much observant of the recent developments in Hong Kong. You know, there has been a lot of talks in the business community whether Hong Kong remains a nice place to be, and it seems that they still believe, the international business community still believes in Hong Kong and still wants to stay on in Hong Kong. Lastly, part of their concern is the process and how the process, it can be the public tenders, it can be any other processes that are part of it. So it is part of a public administration issue, and how these processes that are inherited from the former administration passed on to here have become more and more rigid in a context where indeed, as Paul Zimmerman said previously, the government in Hong Kong is very much engulfed into the bigger, higher picture of its relationship with mainland China. So this is a sunburst of our international community interviewee, and basically what we have done with the core things, we have presented them with the sunburst, and thanks to Calvin for his support in this. Second interview was with a former Hong Kong government person. So, of course, the themes here is very much linked about the government being a driving force behind the smart city and all the public policies implemented, but also the type of audiences, because when we talk about Hong Kong government, basically, and again, as Paul said, it has to address 3 types of audiences: the local Hong Kong, the immigrants who have become Hong Kongers, so many from mainland China and also from overseas foreign countries, and also has to address mainland Chinese government in Beijing. So the government here has to face this very special context that maybe can prevent it from being more effective in certain ways. Also issues with innovations and the ability or inability of a Hong Kong government to pursue innovations, although the word innovation appears everywhere in the Hong Kong government's narrative. Being innovative, being creative, this is part of the image that Hong Kong is trying to portray, but when it comes down to real innovation ideas, the role of think tanks, it is maybe more problematic. Alistair talks about the smart city blueprint and how the smart cities makes government smarter. So I'm not going to go into this. And basically looking into the future is the new narrative. So this smart city blueprint, how to make it into a powerful narrative and not just a list, a very long list of things to do, but with very little KPIs and assessment measures. So this is the sunburst of our second interview. And then last interview that I'm going to share with you. So that's an interview representing policy agent or agency. So this interviewee basically was very much concerned about the issues of trust and technology. Of course, as Paul said, being smarter is being a sustainable city, but also part of the smart city in the first primary definition was very much linked to technology. And in the recent context of Hong Kong, how trust and distrust have changed in the population, and how they view technology has also been very much affected by recent developments. But taking politics aside, there are issues with health. So, for example, what we see with the COVID, the apps with the COVID, and we're talking about setting in a place a passport with vaccines. So all these are health-related technologies that say something about the smart city, but also that say something about the level of trust of the people, or the level of mistrust about the usage of health data, public data. So all these are very much more complex. Those are issues that were not supposed to be that complex, but all of a sudden, with this additional political layer on it, all these issues have become much more complex, and mistrust has grown bigger. And I believe that without a survey that is being now unfolding, we can comment further on this at a later stage. So the persistence of silos inside the Hong Kong administration has been something shared about not only by the international business community, by former government officials, but also by NGOs and other people, think tanks, etc. So this is something to be addressed. It is not something new. Other people working on Hong Kong public administration have also discussed and demonstrated this, but it is today in 2021, the weight of past decisions and the government structure has remained a major obstacle for further innovation. So I think that for Hong Kong to be smarter, there's something to be done in the administration. And finally, the question remains with the role of mainland China. And to many extents, mainland China and other cities in the Greater Bay Area are much more advanced than Hong Kong in terms of smartness. Looking back, Hong Kong has been losing against Greater Bay Area cities, is losing against other cities in the region. We are talking about Japanese cities, we are talking about Korea, we are talking about Singapore as well. So, and then that may link with Calvin's talk about indexes and how to measure Hong Kong, compare Hong Kong with the rest of the world. And I give back the floor to Alistair for the conclusion.
I think that, thanks, Emilie. Oh gosh, that's an even more complex sunburst. We won't concentrate too much on that. These sunbursts, by the way, we didn't do them ourselves. They're thrown up by Enviro, but the proper ones are done with Adobe, aren't they? I think Calvin knows all that. And so essentially, just to conclude, to pull together one or two bits. Our project's about trust in smart city, but I mean, in a sense, if we just take that theme, it's clear that it's the different groups of people we've been interviewing are more or less engaged with it. I mean, NGOs are explicitly engaged with it to some extent, multinationals to a lesser degree. It's less of a concern for people in the Hong Kong government. I mean, these are things we would expect. I think we can see clearly, going back to the introduction at the beginning, we can see clearly that there are different, in a sense, there are different types of sectorally based narrative, in a way, mobility, transport, health. There's perhaps not evidence in our interviews, at least, of one overarching narrative as a persuasive form, at least not in terms of a strong steering in terms of identified causes and solutions, or what the French would say, an overarching référentiel, or one overarching policy frame, if you like. Although clearly, what we were hearing from Paul before about sustainability and so on is one very powerful version of what that might be. Not so much alternative narratives, at least not in terms of other cities, perhaps. But I think we just want to conclude really by saying that obviously this is still very much work in progress. And in a sense, what we're trying to do here in this paper is we're teasing out, trying to tease out some of the key ideas, some of the distinctive ideas that have come from our interviews. And I think we can, and as you say, we'll hand on very nicely to Calvin in a minute, because Calvin's going to be very rigorous in presenting this in terms of the Smart City Index that is emerging. So, okay, thank you. Ming, come on. Okay. Well, maybe are there any questions?
Yes.
Or we could take Calvin
We
and then
can,
have
yes.
questions. Maybe we'll do that, Calvin. Is that okay for you? Sure, sure. You come here and then we'll take any questions. Okay, sure.
I think my chance is loud enough without taking the mask. I think it's fine. Okay. Okay, so good morning everyone. I'm Calvin. I'm the senior research assistant of Professor Ko for the project I'm charging the smart city. And today my topic is about the smart city index as a tool of analysis, which is a study I was already doing since I was studying in Germany. So today's topic it will be in 4 parts. So the first part is about the evaluation of the current smart city index, and then I will use that to present the performance of Hong Kong. And because eventually I will propose a smart city index, so I will also talk about the selection of the smart city index indicators. So before I go into the topic, I would like to first talk about the definition of smart city, because currently there is no unified smart city definition. I need to make one for my this research. So based on my initial review and also based on the other study of the other smart city indexes, I come up with a definition of smart city that a smart city is a municipality using different types of information and communication technologies, including digital device, sensors for data collection, and Internet of Things, so that besides promoting the city in the digital world and ensuring the cybersecurity, the 6 dimensions that economy, mobility, environment, people, live, and governance can be improved. Coincidentally, these 6 smart city dimensions, they are associated with the 6 smart areas initiatives from the Hong Kong Smart City Blueprint. So here is the evaluation framework of my smart city indexes. So I use this one to assess the 20 smart city index, and there's 5 criteria. So the first one is credibility, and the second one is reliability, and the third one is methodology. So the first one, credibility, means the background of the organizations, and the second, reliability, means the number of reference, means how many references they have by the municipality, by the scientific publication, and also by the private media. And then the third one is methodology, like the source of data. So it's about like the secondary data or the primary data. And then the fourth one and the fifth one, the fourth one is the versatileness, which is about the specification of the indexes. Here, I actually had used an analysis called essential indicator analysis, and it actually helped me to build the base of my data proposed smart city index, and I'll talk about that later. And then the last criterion is the preciseness, which is about the reflection of reality. And here, I actually obtained the data from a real-time IP database. So I use that to compare the performance of the cities. And here I use some case study, and I have chosen 2 Chinese cities, 2 German cities, and then 3 well-known smart cities for as a control group. And then here are the list of the 20 accessible smart city index I have discovered. And you can see actually there's quite a lot, and they're all from different countries. But because they all have different features, so it's actually quite difficult to just directly compare all of them. Therefore, I had proposed 5 parameters to choose 6 smart city indexes for further analysis. So I based on the 5 parameters, the first one is the cover of targets, which means if the smart city index is evaluating cities or at the country levels or at regional or for the worldwide cities. So here, for these 6 selected smart city indexes, they all actually are evaluating worldwide cities. And then it's also the other parameters, they are like the covered categories of indexes, like the smart city dimension they have covered, and also the ease of the accessibility of details, the number of targets, and also the evaluation methodology. And so here are the smart city indexes, the details of smart city indexes. So here are the 6 of them. And then here's the results. So you can see based on the efficiency work I have made, the IESG Cities Emotion Index actually has the highest score, which means based on my evaluation the framework, it is the most reliable smart city index. But I can also see that, so you can see for the other 5 ones, their score they actually also quite good. They actually all scored more than half of the full score. So I would say in general, these 6 smart city indexes, they are all quite reliable. So now I will talk about the performance of Hong Kong using the 6 selected smart city indexes. So you can see actually the results they are quite diverse. For example, for the in the IESG Cities Emotion Index, which is the one I had identified, which had the best performance previously, it actually ranked Hong Kong. It actually ranked Hong Kong as 10 out of around 100 cities. So I would say the performance is quite good. But you can also see that, for example, the smart cities indexes, the one in 2019, it ranked Hong Kong as 87. So you can see the results are quite diverse. And I can tell you the reason why Hong Kong had the relatively bad ranking here is because they identify Hong Kong has the worst performance in the car sharing and also the citizen participation, these 2 indicators. And while in the IESG Cities Emotion Index, they actually didn't include citizen participation, these indicators in there, and they only have bike sharing instead of car sharing. So probably there's a reason why there's a big difference of performance of Hong Kong in these 2 indexes. And also, I also have noticed there are 2 quite big drop of Hong Kong's performance in 2 selected smart city indexes, which are the Global E-Governance Survey and also the Innovation Cities Index. I will talk about the Global E-Governance Surveys because Hong Kong's rank actually now you can see is 14. So it's actually quite okay. But a few years ago, Hong Kong's rank in this survey actually is 3rd place. So actually it's dropped from 3rd to 14. This is a quite big drop. And I have also discovered that the main reason is Hong Kong's performance, especially in the citizen participation and also in the privacy. These 2 categories, they have a big drop. That is the reason why the performance of Hong Kong is dropped quite big at the end. And also, I would also talk about the top 3 cities of each selected smart city indexes. And so, except London, which is on another continent, Singapore and Seoul, they actually appear quite often in the top 3 lists. So I would say from the perspective of smart city development, Singapore and Seoul, they will be a quite regional competitor of Hong Kong. And since IESG Cities Emotion Index has identified as the most reliable smart city index based on my previous study, so I would also like to talk about the performance of Hong Kong from that perspective. So they actually identify Hong Kong as a major port and global financial center, and Hong Kong makes use of innovation and technology to address challenges in the urban sphere, city management and quality of life, and to enhance Hong Kong's attractiveness for global companies and talents. Especially, they identified Hong Kong has the best performance in the technology dimension and also in the international projection dimension. And for the technology dimension, it is actually because of the high usage percentage of the mobile phone and internet in Hong Kong. And that's why Hong Kong had crowned the best city in the technology dimension. And you can also see the ranking of performance is actually increasing every year. And comparing regionally, Hong Kong is having the 3rd position. So actually Hong Kong is just behind Tokyo and Singapore. So from this index, the perspective of them, Hong Kong is actually developing quite well regarding the smart city development. And I also have observed 2 different smart city concepts from my previous research. And I would say China and Germany, these 2 countries, they are representing these 2 different smart city concepts. And this also inspired me a special features of my later Smart City Index, and I will come back to it later. But now I will first talk about these two different concepts and using China and Germany as example. So China is more emphasizing on top-down approach, but Germany is actually more emphasizing on the bottom-up approach. And for the city management, China is more focusing on the data collection and big data management by sensors, while Germany is more focusing on the smart city network to connect stakeholders and policymakers. And regarding the smart city dimension, China is more focusing on the economy and government dimension, but Germany is actually more focusing on the environment and people dimensions. And since these two countries has quite different population and development status, so these two factors are also influencing their priority and also like the strategies of these two countries implementing smart city development. And now, is the essential indicators analysis I've mentioned previously, and it actually helped me to build the base of my later proposed Smart City Index. So this essential indicator analysis is to help identifying the common and unique indicators of indexes. And what means common indicators is like when the indicators had appeared several times in several Smart City indexes. And then I will perceive this as a common and essential indicators. And for the unique indicators, is the indicator which just appeared in that specific index. And I would say it is a characteristic of that index. And below the sixth diagram is showing the progress of me doing the analysis. So here is a more detailed result, although there are still not all the indicators are identified. The left table is the common indicators. And you can see they are all indicators that maybe you will always hear about when we are talking about the smart city development, like the air quality, the green buildings, renewable energy, or waste disposal. And therefore, all the common indicators, they are included in my smart city index as a base. And then the right-hand side, the table, it shows the unique indicator of each smart city indexes. And you can see they're actually both all representing the characteristic of each smart city index, like the privacy, the smart parking, and also the social media. And I have also included some of them into my later the framework of the smart city index. So before I talk about my proposed smart city index, I would also like to introduce the topology of the smart city index. When I was studying that 20 smart city indexes, I realized they all have their own dominant tendency, and they can be grouped into 6 categories. Is actually slightly different from the smart city dimension identified previously, but is also like what they want to research about when they are making these smart city indexes. So you can see the 6 types of the smart city indexes. They are the smart economy, smart governance, smart living, smart performance, smart project, and smart technology. For the multiplicity, if the index they have covered more than 2 aspects, then the index will be grouped as multiplicity. So here I show the list with the selected 20 smart city index and also their corresponding categories. So the 6 previously selected and evaluated smart city indexes, they actually are all come from the category of smart performance, smart governance, and multiplicity. Therefore, to balance the aspect and the tendency, I have also further selected 2 from smart living, 2 from smart ecology, and then 1 of each from smart economy and smart project for further analysis to build my smart city index. And so here are the details of the extra selected smart city indexes. And so now I would like to talk about the smart city index I propose. So the aim is to analyze the smart city development of the worldwide cities with different concepts and background. And for the use definitions here, since I have identified 2 different smart city concepts, therefore, how I implement this concept into my smart city index is, first, I propose a general definition, and then I will define smart city into 2 definitions of concept. So the first general one is a smart city is a municipality using different types of information and communication technologies to improve the quality of life. And then the two type of smart city concept, which I present previously using China and Germany example. One is the big data policy, which is the cities emphasizing on smart governance by implementing sensors for data collection to manage the society and improve the city service. And then the second smart city concept is sustainable smartness, which is the cities emphasizing on smart environment by implementing technologies for monitoring city operations, such as transportation and energy usage to be more sustainable. So how I use these two concepts here is I have made two different weighting sets for these two concepts. So for the cities, first I will group them regarding the population and also the classification of the smart city concept. For example, for Hong Kong, it will be in a group of big data policy, and then population is 500,000 or more. And then the ranking and the comparison will only be performed within the same group, so that other cities will be compared only with the cities with similar background to achieve fair results. Other than that, my idea is like have three rankings. So the first ranking is compare within the same group with the same smart city concept and population. And then the second ranking will be without a consideration of population. So all the cities will be on the same list, comparing together, but only applying different weighting sets according to the smart city concept. And then the third ranking will be without consideration of smart city concept and population, which means all the cities will be on the same list, and all of them, they will have the equal weightings. The reason of having two more rankings is that I want to note the influence of smart city concept and population to the city's performance regarding smart city development. So here is the weighting set of the two smart city concept, and you can see some of them, they have higher percentage, higher ratio, and some of them is a bit lower, according to the definition of the smart city concept. Like for the big data policy, it has actually less ratio of the people and society and environment, because in this definition, they are not too concerned about these two categories. But for the sustainable smartness, people and society and environment, this two category has slightly higher ratio. And then this is the group of the classification of the population. There are 5 groups of them. And now here are the framework of my proposed smart city index. And there are 9 categories and 70 indicators. And the 9 categories, 6 of them, they are from the smart city dimension, and then 3 of them, they are the extras identified from the other studies, like the perception, the privacy, and also the technology. And then at the end, I also would like to show the details and measurements of my framework, my smart city index framework. So you can see some of them, they're referring to the other smart city index to get the results. And then some of them, they are binary variable. So in general, actually this framework, I had also referred to a ISO document, ISO 37122, distant document to form this measurement. And I got this inspiration also from the IESE Cities Emotion Index, because they actually have included this distant document as one of the indicators. And I mean, this measurement, they are all still in progress, because I'm not sure if all the data I can be discovered for the evaluation. So it will be my further study. Then my next step, I will try to first set the scope of the cities I would like to use for comparison and also to study. And then I will see if all the data I could really be collected. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we can take questions from the audience and from the room. Yes, Alistair.
Can I jump in? Putting 3 fine presentations that we've got 4 presenters, 3 presentations altogether. What we are trying to get at as far as Hong Kong is concerned, that's my big question actually. I do know Paul's work for a good number of years already. We've fought some battles together, some more successful than others, for sure. I think at the end of the day, of course, the government itself has a smart city policy, so to speak. And if that is the official discourse, which by definition is, using the political science terminology here, hegemonic, because that's the authoritative, the official discourse presented by the government for some years, and under which, of course, there are a number of policy developments, such as smart ID or shared economy, including those not very successful bicycle sharing schemes, already aborted, I'm afraid, most of them, and so on. And then we have Porsche initiative coming a long way, designing Hong Kong, and all the other ongoing initiatives are striking a balance, if you like. As a third party, I'm looking at this landscape, bottom-up approach as users, but not just users passively, but also proactively engaging policymakers, trying to inform policymakers with evidence-based projects, proposals, plans, experiences, and stories with those photographs to sort of amend and adjust the hegemonic discourse about what the government intends to do for Hong Kong, becoming a smart city. So what prospects, my very generic, very big question being, what prospects are there to strike that balance? And then we go back to what Calvin said a moment ago. The German approach is more appreciative about this bottom-up citizen participatory channels, whereas Chinese style maybe is more top-down. And I got a feeling as a Hong Kong citizen that we don't get much luck with the bottom-up approach anymore. Increasingly, the government would like to talk about Hong Kong being part and parcel of the Greater Bay Area. And under national planning, now the 13th five-year plan and later over the 14th five-year plan. So what luck or what chances prospect there might be for a sort of more bottom-up approach as far as Hong Kong is concerned, may eventually come back to this whole enterprise about building a new index or assessing those indices for Hong Kong. So what role remains for citizen participation at all as we proceed down this road of forging a smart city in Hong Kong? It's a big question, I know that. Thank you. For everybody.
When I listened to the presentation, I was thinking about other discussions I've had over the last 10 years. One is the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and then the other one is the city we need, which is the UN Habitat discussion about what is the city that we need and how do we measure the city. So to me, if anybody says we need a smart city, then I say no, we need a sustainable city. If the city is not sustainable, you're not smart. But if the city is sustainable, you're smart. So to me, so when I look at the index here, I see part of the discussion in the study focus on the sustainable city, and part of the discussion or the measurements and the indexes that we work with or that you have analyzed tend to float back to the kind of technology side of things. So I wonder whether there are other indicators you can use, and look into the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals. And then under that, you got SDG number 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities, and that is that's analyzed by UN Habitat and the city we need. And they did a number of categories. Is city socially inclusive? Is it collectively managed, democratically governed, so top down, bottom up? Is there a shared identity, sense of place? Is it affordable? City that's not affordable is not very sustainable. Is it cohesive territorially? Is it well planned, walkable, transit friendly? So that's urban development kind of parameters there. Economically vibrant, so is the economy working? If there's no business and nobody has a job, then you're not going to get very far either. Is it regenerative and resilient? So if we're not going to have climate change programs in Hong Kong, then we're going to drown on our waterfront. Then we're not very smart either. But that's a very measurable one. Safe, healthy. So health indexes, and I think we have good measurements for that. And then the other one is the learning and innovating. And learning and innovating, and part of learning and innovating is good information. Good information means good sensors throughout the city to have up-to-date and timely data. So to me, the timely data that tends to, in the discussion spot, be put on top to me is the last thing. It's an important aspect because if you don't know, you can't do anything. So you have to know. But it's one of the 10 or 11 out of the SDGs, 10 or 11. So to me, it is one on, it's not the one on the top, it's one on the bottom in the sense of there are the other things that we need to measure. And so when I look at your indexes, I think the way of trying to analyze it, I was really excited. But then in the end, I feel that the scope of indexes you compare and that we then pick out the indicators for are only a subset of the indicators that I think we should be looking at when we just say smart city is sustainable and then look at sustainability indexes and bring them in rather than only limit yourself to indexes that name themselves smart indicators. Am I a smart city or not? And I'm like, yeah, and then you have limited yourself, but unnecessarily. So I think if we can broaden, this is my suggestion. I'm not sure where the scope of your research are, but I would suggest that that's a possibility to broaden it and have a richer set of measurements.
Yeah.
Let me just say, I mean, Calvin, I'll just say actually the question here is as good as the question I was going to say, but basically just say Calvin's done a cracking job really in getting together all those indexes, they're mapping them out. I mean, it's incredible. The 20
I love these things.
And it's but I think that is really the way forward. And I think it's, at the end, when you weigh basically big data and sustainable smartness, I mean, I suppose it's fleshing out in a way more precisely some of those indicators. And I think quite right, the sustainable development goals need to be looked at perhaps for this second part of that.
Yeah, and the city we need, I suggest.
Yeah, okay.
The UN Habitat city we need urban campaign.
So.
There's a question in the audience. Hi, Nathan. Thanks so much for your presentation. How do you come with this set of smart city indicators? What are your references? Do you know how these smart city indicators are developed?
Okay, so thank you for your question. And I will first talk about if I know how those smart city indicators are developed. And actually, this is one of the reasons why I start this research, because actually most of the smart city indexes, they haven't really talked about the reason behind that. I could see, for example, one which is always talking about the smart mobility because it's made by parking company. You can see some of indicators they use is referring to what is their research purpose, the mobility, the e-mobile, e-vehicle, and the renewable energy. However, taking this as an example, some of these smart city index, they have included maybe Facebook, number of users on Facebook as one of the indicators, which is quite weird for me, because well, firstly, those index, they are not only evaluating European cities, but it is for worldwide cities. So how could it possible to use that in, for example, China? Because Facebook is not really using in China, and of course, then the performance of these indicators in China, of course, is worse. And also, I could also understand citizen participation is also quite a big indicator when we're talking about city development. But we also have to know that some of the cities are not really thinking about this aspect as one of their city development strategies. So that is why I want to know what is the reason behind them to have this kind of smart city indicators, and that's how I initiate my current research. And for my own set of the smart city indicators, actually, what I want to do is to see how many indicators that are commonly mentioned by different smart city index. And that's why I had used the essential indicator analysis to first identify a group of indicators which is always mentioned by the other literature or about by the other think tank or NGO talking about smart city development, and I use them as a base first, and then I study the other smart city dimension, and then based on their research, I take out some specific terms and also like the idea, and then to merge that in my main framework. So my reference, I would say, is from the other literatures and also from like that 20 selected smart city indexes I have discovered. Yes.
Thanks for that. Can I just make an additional comment? I mean, I think essentially what you've done is you've done a really, fine bit of work there. One of the things I've worked a bit on indexes, and actually one of the difficulties is how do you, can you measure in a sense, or should you measure things that are material and things that are constructed? I mean, you could say, well, maybe you can measure how many people use the mobile phone in Hong Kong. As you pointed out, 19. I'm sure there's more than 100% actually, because everybody's got about 3 of them. But then if you say things, if you're talking about city vision, for example, what's the vision of the city? That's a nice concept, actually, city vision. But it's a bit more difficult perhaps to put into an index. I know that you do talk about it, don't you? I just wonder, obviously with these 70 indicators, you're still at a very early stage in working out what sort of sources you might go and get that. But how do you, I mean, can you put, I suppose, material and constructed things in the same sort of framework?
Yeah, that's actually something I'm trying to do. I want to make it measurable. But to be honest, somehow it's quite difficult. Like the one you said, the vision, because what my idea is to evaluate if the smart city strategy of a city is that foreseeing the future, or is that practical, or is that even achievable? But to be honest, of course, it's difficult to just measure, because there is some just concept and you cannot really just measure that by numbers. And so for here, that's also come back to what I said. There are so many different smart city index for calculating the smart city from different dimensions. And then there is one specific index, it's called Smart City Strategy Index. And this is made by a company which they evaluating all the smart city concept from different cities. So it's like they measure their future 10 years. What is their planning, what they want to achieve if they have target, and then they use them to make their own index called Smart City Strategy Index. And that's how some of my indicators, if it is about the concept, then I will try to relate to those indexes to get the data. But of course, I also need to work it further in the future. But that is now my idea, yes.
I actually just Googling it, the Sustainable Cities Index. I noticed that Arcadis did one, the World Urban Campaign, UN Habitat did one. So I just wonder whether, if we don't want to get caught in the trap of smart is IT, and we want to move out of that and get to smart cities beyond just IT, although people call it smart, but recognizing that there is a bias in that towards IT. To move away from that, we redefine smart as sustainable. And then, and I think the way of doing the research, I think is very commendable. I think it's a really good approach. And then, but merging that in, then we get rid of some of that IT bias in terms of sustainable city or smart city, and then we can strengthen your work. That would be my only suggestion. I like the whole kind of methodology that's been outlined here, but I just wonder whether we can get rid of some of the bias.
I would say it's possible, but because from my personal perspective, to be honest, I think smart city is just a method to achieve sustainable cities. So I would say cities somehow will need to use some technologies to improve their performance in the different aspects. What I think is, I also have known that there are quite different concepts. And what I use sustainable smartness is like to see if that city is majorly using the technologies to improve their sustainable performance regarding the sustainability. And so I would say, I think there will quite also different concepts which I could identify in the future. And when I identify that, like the resilient city, or like using smart city technology for that. And then I would also like to use that to develop another set of the rating set for the city's evaluation. So what I think is, I will try to make an indicator which can cover more of the aspect of the cities, but on the other hand, to differentiate their different concepts. Then I will use the rating set differences to work on that. But yeah, I think the technology is also somehow is quite a big topic for a smart city. Like if the city can really improve that, or which kind of technology they distribute. Yes.
Just want to respond to Kenneth's very good comments. So what are the prospects from here? And jumping on what Paul mentioned about SDGs. One part of Agenda 2030 of the United Nations within the SDGs is precisely to emphasize the role of the business sector. Because our bias has been so far to concentrate on the driving force of the government, relying on the driving force of NGOs, of the civil sector. But the business sector has been very much absent, but they have been put back in Agenda 2030, saying that the business sector maybe is the actor, the stakeholder that has the most impact to drive us towards the SDGs. And Agenda 2030 is trying to help us move beyond business as usual. So how do we take it from here? In the past 2 months, I submitted 2 research proposals, basically linking on this, saying that in Hong Kong, the business sector has to be associated, and let us stop relying only on the government to move forward, because we have seen from our interviews certain limitations of the government, certain limitations of the political context, but the business sector is there. Now, talking about indexes, because of Agenda 2030, there are several impact factors to measure specifically the impact of firms, of companies on the SDGs. It can be in the finance sector, it can be in other sectors. Of course, SDGs is not about only sustainability, it's also about socio-economic indicators. And maybe, Kevin, if one way to move forward beyond what everyone has been saying here is to compare those existing impact scales for companies and how they are trying to move. Of course, companies are here to make business and to make profit, and this is no question. We are not going to say companies cannot make profit, but how can they make a profit while working towards the SDGs? So maybe this is also one way to assess the population, the stakeholder agency, but not just people. You know, I think people in society is a big group. And in people in society, maybe you can make a subgroup that is either civil sector or business sector. And the business has not been very present while they are the one having maybe the greatest impact on this. So that's just my 2 cents to reply to your good comments.
That is like, I'll just make a couple of responses to you as well. Sure. I mean, that was an excellent intervention, Emilie. Very, very interesting, because it's true, you've been working on the SDGs and your, you know, your impact. I mean, the project you put in there is really, really focusing on that. I think your question is a great question, Kenneth. I mean, in a sense, it's probably one that only a Hong Kong can answer. You know, so we're coming from the outside, clearly. It seems to me that I guess in any contextual, I suppose the thing with any sort of general comparative research is that, you know, it's a trade-off between breadth and depth, isn't it? You know, it's a trade-off between drilling down and rising up. You know, if you think of Sartorius, rising up the ladder of abstraction and so on, or moving down the ladder of abstraction. Again, this permanent trade-off between, I suppose, specificity and generality. And I guess the thing with Hong Kong is, how do you? I mean, to be honest, because we're in Chatham House rules, I suppose. Well, probably not because we're on Zoom, but anyway. Well, we should be in Chatham House rules. But basically, it goes out anyway. So yeah, because it all comes out, doesn't it? But in a way, it's interesting our project because I mean the problematic is, if you like, trust in the process. Now that, in a sense, is a very neutral frame. Actually, well, certainly when in my mind when we were getting the project together, it's a very neutral frame. It was about how do we how do we trust different elements of smart city? Smart city probably understood and mainly in a data sense, in the sense that that's the area that might be trust or mistrust. So, and what's kind of, I think, quite interesting in our, and it's obviously it's further to Hong Kong, but it's how, at one level, of course, so that question remains a sort of technical question. Do you trust the technology, for example? Does it do what you want it to do? But then, of course, it's spilled over into, do you trust the uses that's being made of the technology, in particular in relation to the COVID app and so on? And then, of course, we're trying to avoid the big question, the elephant in the room question, so to speak. So, but in a sense, do you trust, I suppose, the whole environment within which the smart city can develop in Hong Kong or anywhere else, or anywhere else? But those, I think the smart city questions are quite straightforward to ask. Trust questions are actually a bit more difficult, to be frank. And so we're asking them, because I mean, this is I've been working on these trust issues for the last decade or whatever, in 3 different countries. So I don't see why I should stop asking those questions, but clearly they are contextualized questions and they mean something different in each particular context. And so in a sense, I think in the sense of Hong Kong, they clearly might make something different than they would in Lyon, or just coming back to Lyon, because that's where I was before coming here. It's interesting, in Lyon, bike sharing is absolutely massive and it works. Everybody gets on the bike and they use the telephone to reserve the bike, but then and it's totally transformed. So that's the sort of, that's the marriage, the happy marriage in a way of, I suppose, technology and sustainability. Because in a city like Lyon, I think it's typical European cities, many like that. There's been a genuine sort of revolution in the sense that everybody, far fewer cars, diesel's just been banned actually from Lyon city centre. Everybody's on the bike, and I mean, obviously in the Netherlands it's even more the case. But I suppose in a sense here, clearly, that the point of saying that is just mainly to say that even on the trust issue, it varies substantially between countries. So that's not an answer to your question. It's just trying to, I suppose, recontextualize the question. So what influence?
Bike sharing may be low in Hong Kong, but Uber is doing well.
Yes.
So,
That's illegal.
so,
This is so ridiculous.
I know. But I mean, it's for this city, because it's not a cycle. It's the cyclability of the city is limited to the flat areas, and so it's limited. I just make one note that I wanted to share from the early part of the conversation about the silos within government. For me, the silos in the government, that's something that's been identified since Greek times. We go back to the Greek books about government, they also talk about silos and reorganization. So I guess the issue is not about the silos, it's about managing silos. It's about making sure that your silos are adjusted to changing circumstances and changing public aspirations. And if that, I think then we're getting closer to where we want to be. And so in all our work, to me, I don't think silos fine. Every company, at the university, we've got silos everywhere, because otherwise you can't work if everything is fluid all the time. But then it's about adjusting them. And then it comes to management time, the ability to change and to make change. So that I think would be helpful.
Right, this is some admin again. For sustainable development, we also
exactly what we're talking about.
Communication strategy and policing narrative that would relate to policymakers and people in the context of, for example, the aspiration government for the environmental responsibility and sustainability. Silos will always exist, shall be matrix reflect cross-disciplinary and multiple stakeholder cooperation and practice outcome. Talking about trust, sees that attitude, culture, psychological behaviors, expectation, and management all need to be factored in the matrix somehow.
It's exactly that point, isn't it? If you want to manage change, then you need trust, because if nobody trusts you, then managing change is very difficult. But people need to trust you that to change and experiment and try out and so on. But there was no trust because there's very little experimentation, very little trying out.
I mean, I think actually, in the political science is true, right? It's so interesting question about Edmund's phrase that. But it's all about, I mean, the idea of, in a sense, governance capacity or governance legitimacy. Because in a sense, if you want, and again, change management comes in here. If you want to have change management, then you need to have a form of governance legitimacy, be it a government, be it a decision-making system, be it a network. We have to have a form of legitimacy for that governing mechanism. And that legitimacy has to depend a little bit on a measure of trust. Now, trust can be determined either in terms of interpersonal interactions between members who make policies, or it can be perhaps determined more generally, feeling that the outputs produced by governing mechanisms, if you like, are trusted within society. Because if they're not trusted within society, then there's a big problem. And I think, and one thing, a bit of jargon, but one thing we talk about in our project is thin trust. And we say that actually you've got to have thin trust. If not, public policy is not really possible. And that thin trust doesn't mean a massive buy-in to every aspect of the policy, but it means a basic sense that the policy forms part of the public good, that in fact there's a genuine benevolence towards that policy, and that sentiment is quite widely diffused. So I think in terms, and again, it's interesting, I mean, silos in a sense, we're not saying specific to Hong Kong, although I think there is a particular contextual dimension that maybe the change that, I mean, not all of this sort of, I suppose, the new public management change that you saw over across Europe in the 80s and 90s, well, that's been a bit less evident here. Maybe the inheritance has been perhaps stronger because of the particular conditions. But I think obviously, and the COVID, I don't want to talk about COVID too much, but it's interesting that some of the work's coming out about governance legitimacy and managing COVID. And there's a great article about Norway. How have the Norwegians done? And essentially, it's interesting because they've really managed to sort of build on a set of understandings between actors in Norway, quite a small country actually, but produce a policy sort of repertoire, if you like, that makes sense to the Norwegian citizens and get and actually work in very good intelligence and synergy. I think, I mean, it's a bit, a bit amorphous, but there's something, that's why I like moving from, I suppose, material to constructive, because in a sense, governing, what is it? It's partly material, it's partly, raising taxes, whatever. It's also partly constructive in the sense that it's partly getting people to believe in what you're doing. It's partly getting a set of shared beliefs about the wisdom or not of particular actions, about the need to sustain the environment, about keeping country parks and so on. I mean, these are all, I think, part of that. Those essential qualities really. That's my take at trying to answer your question.
So it's been 2 hours. We are together. I think we can put an end to this very fruitful meeting. So thank you very much for all of you joining us on Zoom. Thank you to the participants.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cindy, Paul, for coming. Thank you, Calvin and Alistair. So stay tuned with GIS activities, and we are happy to keep you informed. So don't hesitate to drop us a line if you want to continue to engage with our department. Thank you all.